My parents forced me to drop out to pay my sister's college fees now. Now they're broke and begging me for help after years of calling me. Useless. I'm a 28-year-old guy. And for as long as I can remember, I've been the one holding my family together. I grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, the kind with peeling paint, flickering lights, and a heater that rattled like it was about to give up. My parents always said we were getting by, but I knew even as a kid that every dollar mattered. Groceries were counted in coupons. Birthdays meant a homemade cake instead of gifts. My younger sister Emily was the exception to every rule. She was the bright one, the one who got to dream. My mom would beam when teachers called about her grades, and my dad would brag about her potential to anyone who'd listen. When it came to me, though, they only ever talked about responsibility, how I should help out more, take work seriously, stop wasting time on dreams. After high school wasn't even a discussion. My parents sat me down one evening at the chipped kitchen table. My dad said, "Son, you know Emily's future depends on us. We just can't afford the tuitions." I nodded, pretending it didn't sting. That night, I applied for warehouse jobs while Emily celebrated her scholarship acceptance with balloons and pizza. I started working at 17 delivery shifts, cleaning gigs, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on. I'd come home to find Emily surrounded by textbooks. And my mom would whisper, "She's gonna make it, thanks to you." That line stuck with me for years. I guess I always believed family came first, no matter what. Even when I noticed how rarely they said thank you. Even when I realized the bright one never lifted a finger to help. I told myself my time would come. It had to. But deep down, I think I already knew my role wasn't to shine. It was to keep everyone else's light burning. When I turned 19, I still held on to this quiet hope that maybe, somehow, I'd get my turn. I'd saved up a small amount from my warehouse job, not much, but enough to cover community college tuition for one semester. I remember sitting with the brochure on my lap, tracing the words business administration like it was the key to a better life. But when I told my parents, my mom's expression froze. "Honey," she started carefully, "we can't do that right now. Emily's tuition just went up, and the car needs repairs." My dad added, "Be reasonable, son. You'll have time later. Your sister's got one shot." I wanted to argue to tell them I'd been waiting for my one shot for years. But their faces were set like the decision had already been made before I opened my mouth. That night, I lay awake listening to Emily's laughter from the next room as she FaceTimed. Her friends about dorm shopping and college parties. The next morning, I withdrew the cash I'd saved and handed it to my dad. "Just make sure she gets what she needs," I said quietly. He smiled, patted my shoulder, and called me a good man. That phrase was supposed to feel like honor. Instead, it felt like a chain. From then on, my life became a cycle. Work, sleep, repeat. I'd wake before sunrise, haul boxes until my hands blistered, then come home to empty dinner plates and overdue bills. My parents told everyone how lucky they were to have a son who helped out. But deep down, I knew luck had nothing to do with it. Still, I kept my head down. I told myself this was temporary, that once Emily graduated, once she made it big, things would even out. I didn't know it yet. But that belief, that blind loyalty, would become the biggest mistake of my life. Emily's college years were a blur of phone calls, family visits, and Facebook posts that made my parents beam with pride. Every weekend, Mom would show me her new pictures, Emily posing on campus, holding certificates, surrounded by smiling friends and expensive clothes. "She's doing so well," Mom would gush. "All your hard work is paying off." That sentence hit me like a punch every time your hard work. I was still in that same warehouse, pulling double shifts to cover rent and groceries while they sent whatever extra they had to Emily. I barely had time to sleep, but my parents never asked how I was holding up. When I came home drenched in sweat, Dad would just say, "Don't complain. You're helping your sister succeed." One night Emily called during dinner. I could hear the laughter of her roommates in the background. "Hey," she said, "can you send me a bit more this month? My textbooks are crazy expensive." I hesitated, saying I was already stretched thin. Before I could finish, Mom snatched the phone. Don't be selfish, she scolded. She's studying to make a better life for all of us. So I sent her the money, the rent money. I skipped meals for a week just to make sure she got it. A part of me resented it, but another part kept whispering, she's family. This is what good sons do. Years passed like that. When Emily graduated, the whole family drove to her ceremony, except me. I couldn't take the day off without losing my job. I watched the live stream from my break room, wiping sweat off my face as she threw her cap in the air. That night, Mom called, crying tears of joy. We did it, she said, but I realized something she never would. Only one of us had actually made it. After Emily graduated, I thought things might finally shift. Maybe I could start saving for myself, maybe even enroll in a night course. But nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. Emily landed a decent corporate job in another city. But my parents still expected me to keep paying the household bills like before. One evening, I came home after a 14-hour shift, my back aching and my uniform caked in grime. Mom was on the couch scrolling through her phone, smiling at Emily's new office photos. I asked, carefully, is Emily helping out now that she's working? Mom looked up, surprised, almost offended. She's just starting her career, she said. She needs time to settle. Time to settle? I repeated. I've been working nonstop for years. When do I get to settle? Dad's newspaper crinkled as he lowered it. Watch your tone, he snapped. You've always had it easy compared to what we went through. Don't act like you're owed something. That sentence, you've had it easy, burned through me. My hands shook as I said, easy. I gave up college. I gave you my savings. I worked overtime so Emily could live comfortably while I starved, and you still act like I'm nothing. The room went dead silent. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but not for me. Don't twist things, she whispered. You should be proud of your sister. That was it. Something in me broke. I walked into my room, packed my few clothes, and the old photo of my dad holding me as a kid, and left. Mom yelled after me, don't you dare walk out on your family. But for the first time in my life, I didn't stop. The air outside was cold, sharp, and terrifying, but it was mine. I didn't know where I was going yet. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. The first few weeks after leaving home felt like stepping into a void. I slept on a friend's couch, surrounded by the faint smell of instant noodles and cigarette smoke. Every night, I'd stare at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I hadn't made a huge mistake. There was freedom. Sure, but also this crushing silence where my family's noise used to be. I picked up whatever work I could find. Construction. Plumbing assistance, even hauling scrap metal. The pay was low, the hours long, but no one yelled at me or guilt-tripped me for keeping a few dollars for myself. I started saving again, bit by bit. At night, I'd scroll through online courses, reading about certifications and trade licenses I couldn't yet afford. Still, I bookmarked them all like promises to my future self. Sometimes, I'd pass by families at diners, parents laughing with their kids, and I'd feel this deep, aching envy. My family only ever laughed when it was about me, never with me. But I used that feeling as fuel. Every insult, every dismissal, every "you're not good enough" echoed in my mind whenever I wanted to give up. One rainy evening, after finishing a plumbing job, I stood under a flickering streetlight, holding my first full paycheck in months that didn't go straight to someone else. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My hands were rough, my clothes damp, but for the first time, I felt something close to peace. I moved into a tiny studio apartment soon after, cracked ceiling, no heat, but no expectations either. It was quiet, lonely, but honest. I didn't realize it then. But this lonely rebuilding phase was shaping me into someone my family wouldn't recognize, someone who no longer lived to please them, and soon. That transformation would be tested in the most painful way imaginable. 5 years passed. My business card now said licensed contractor, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. Word spread fast about my reliability, and jobs came in steadily. I'd wake up before dawn, drive to sites with the smell of sawdust and coffee in the air, and feel this quiet pride that I'd made it here alone. I hadn't spoken to my parents in years, and honestly, I thought that chapter was over then. One afternoon, a message popped up on my phone from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Emily. I'd really like to see you. I'm getting married and Mom and Dad want you there." For a minute, I just stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, but another part that tired, forgiving part that had kept me chained for years, whispered, maybe things have changed. A month later, I found myself walking into the reception hall, dressed in my best suit, surrounded by relatives I hadn't seen since I left. Everyone smiled too politely, like they didn't know what to say to me. Then Mom spotted me and burst into tears. "You came," she said, clutching my hand. "You've always been such a good son." For a moment I almost believed her, until, halfway through dinner, I overheard Emily's husband talking to a friend about their messy financial situation. He laughed and said, at least her parents covered most of it. Used some kind of old loan in her brother's name. My stomach dropped. I excused myself, went outside, and called the bank the next morning. The truth was worse than I imagined years ago. My parents had taken out a massive loan using my identity, my name, my credit, my trust. The wedding wasn't a reunion. It was the moment I realized the people I once called family had stolen more than my youth. They'd stolen my future. I didn't sleep that night. My phone screen glowed in the dark as I stared at the debt notice from the bank, the numbers looking almost unreal. Tens of thousands in loans, all under my name. I felt sick. Every payment I'd made over the years, every sacrifice, every hour spent believing they'd one day appreciate me, it had all been for this. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I drove straight to my parents' house, the same one I'd helped pay for all those years. The walls looked smaller, the paint more faded. When Mom opened the door, her face lit up with fake surprise. "Sweetheart, you didn't have to come by. Cut it," I said, pushing past her. "Why is there a loan in my name?" Her smile faltered. Dad appeared behind her, arms crossed. "Watch your tone," he said automatically. My tone. I pulled the printed statement from my jacket and slapped it onto the table. "You stole my identity, took a loan, and tanked my credit. How could you do that?" Mom started crying immediately. "We were desperate, honey. Your sister needed help. You were doing well, and you thought you could rob me again," I snapped. "I left so you'd stop bleeding me dry, and you'd still found a way." Dad's voice rose. "Don't you dare speak to your mother that way. We did what we had to do for this family. You owe us that much. After all, we sacrificed for you." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't sacrifice a thing. You used me because I was too stupid to say no." They stood there speechless as I walked toward the door. "I'm done," I said quietly. "This time, you're the ones who will pay." The door slammed behind me, and for the first time in years, I meant every word. Filing the police report was the hardest thing I've ever done. Sitting in that cold, fluorescent-lit office, I could barely get the words out. My parents used my identity to take out loans. The officer looked at me like he'd heard it all before. But when I slid the documents across the table, his expression changed. It wasn't just a small loan. It was years of accumulated debt. Fraud. When the investigation began, everything I'd tried to keep private exploded. My parents were summoned for questioning. The whispers started from relatives, neighbors, even old co-workers of my dad's. "He turned on his own family," they said. What kind of son does that? Mom called me every day at first, sometimes sobbing, sometimes screaming. "You're ruining us. After everything we did for you?" She'd cry through the phone. I tried ignoring her, but every voicemail chipped away at me. There's no guidebook for choosing justice over love. No way to stop the guilt from eating at you, even when you know you're right. When the verdict came, it felt surreal. They were found guilty of fraud, ordered to sell their house to repay the debt. Watching the property listing go live online, the same house where I'd spent my entire childhood, broke something in me. Family turned their backs on me completely. Aunt Linda called to say, "You could have handled this privately." Emily never reached out at all. I sat alone in my apartment that night, staring at the dark window, wondering if I'd just destroyed the last pieces of my family. I told myself justice mattered, but all I felt was empty. That was my rock bottom, sitting there with the truth, the guilt, and no one left to call. And that's when I realized sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. After the fallout, I disappeared for a while. No social media, no calls, no explanations. I just worked. The days bled together in a rhythm of exhaustion and rebuilding. Every morning, I'd lace up my boots, pour bitter coffee into a dented mug, remind myself that the only way out was forward. It started small, repair jobs, home renovations, fixing leaky roofs, but word spread fast. Clients began recommending me for bigger projects, and soon, I had more work than I could handle alone. I hired a couple of guys who'd been laid off, taught them what I knew, and together, we built something real. The first time I stood in front of my own company's sign, Turner Home Restoration, I felt something I'd never known before, pride without pain attached. No strings, no guilt. Just the quiet satisfaction of earning something myself. Still, the ghosts lingered. Some nights I'd wake up thinking about the house I grew up in, the smell of Mom's cooking, Dad's laugh before the bitterness took over. Those memories stung. But they also reminded me how far I'd come. When I finally paid off every bit of the fraudulent debt and repaired my credit, I printed out the confirmation letter and pinned it to my office wall. A small reminder that I'd survived them. My business grew faster than I ever imagined. I moved into a modest home, nothing fancy, but warm, with sunlight spilling through the windows each morning. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone anything. I thought that would be the end of the story, that my parents and Emily were just ghosts of another life. But life has a cruel way of circling back, and my past was about to knock on my door again, this time begging for mercy. It was a quiet Sunday morning when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A shaky voice said, "It's Emily." For a moment, I froze. It had been nearly 3 years since the trial. I didn't know who else to call, she said, her voice cracking. He left me, okay? My husband took everything. The words hit harder than I expected. She explained how her husband's big investments had failed. Their apartment was gone, her job laid off during downsizing. Now she was back at our parents' place, the same one they'd barely managed to keep, afloat after selling off what little they had. "They're not doing well," she whispered. "Mom's been sick. Dad's barely keeping up with bills. Please, they need your help." For a long time, I said nothing. My eyes drifted across my office, the polished desk, the framed business license, the photo of me and my team at our company's first major build. Everything in that room existed because I learned to survive without them. I don't think I can do that. "Emily," I said finally, "you all made your choices." She started crying, angry this time. "You think you're so righteous? You ruined our parents' lives." I laughed softly, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. "No, Emily, they ruined mine. I just stopped letting them." After that, she hung up. For the next few weeks, I ignored every call. But they didn't stop. Mom, Dad, even a few cousins, all asking for help. All acting like nothing had ever happened. Each voicemail ended the same way. Family should help family. But as I sat there listening to their voices echo through my empty office, I realized family only mattered when they needed me to bleed. A month later, I was at the job site when my foreman called out, "There's someone asking for you." I walked toward the gate, wiping the dust off my hands, and froze. My mother was standing there. She looked smaller somehow, her hair grayer, her shoulders slumped beneath an oversized coat. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her mom. I said cautiously. She smiled weakly. "You look good," she murmured. Her voice trembled. "I've missed you." I stayed silent. The smell of fresh concrete and gasoline hung in the air, sharp and grounding. "Why are you here?" I finally asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "We've lost everything," she said softly. "The house, the savings, it's all gone. Your father's sick. Emily can't find work. Please, son. We need your help. I glanced around. My crew had stopped pretending not to listen. The weight of years of humiliation pressed down on me, every insult, every sacrifice, every night I'd gone hungry while they called me useless. Help, I repeated. You remember when I needed help, right? When I was sleeping on floors, starving just to pay your bills. She started to cry harder. We were wrong, she said. We see that now. Please, you're our only hope. For a moment, my chest tightened. The boy in me wanted to forgive her, but the man I'd become knew better. I shook my head slowly. I already gave you everything I had. You just didn't notice until it was gone. Her hand reached for mine, but I stepped back. I can't do this again, I said quietly. She stared at me, broken, before turning away. As she disappeared into the crowd, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not relief, not victory, just the end. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan filling the space where my thoughts used to race. For years, I had imagined this moment, the day my parents would finally understand the pain they caused. But now that it had happened, there was no satisfaction. Just silence. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and looked around the house I'd built from scratch. Every tile, every nail, every inch of paint existed because I refused to become who they told me I was. My success wasn't loud or glamorous, but it was mine, built from the ashes of everything they'd taken. Sometimes, guilt still whispered. I'd wonder if I should have helped them, if compassion was the higher road. But then I'd remember the years they called me useless while I worked double shifts to pay their bills, the way they stole my future and wore it like a gift to someone else. Some debts can't be repaid, not in money, not in forgiveness. A few months later, I drove through my old neighborhood. The house I grew up in stood empty, the yard overgrown, windows dark. For a moment, I parked across the street, just watching. I could almost hear echoes of my younger self inside, the clatter of dishes. Dad's voice barking orders, Mom's laughter when Emily came home with good grades. All ghosts now. I stepped out of the truck, stood by the cracked fence, and whispered, You taught me sacrifice. I just wish you'd taught me love. Then I turned away. No tears, no bitterness, just peace, cold, steady, and final. As I drove off, the rearview mirror caught the faint outline of that decaying house fading into the distance. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running from my past. I was finally leaving it behind.